A very good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Jubli Majumdar, Assistant Professor in the School of Human Settlement at Xavier University, Bhubaneswar. I welcome you all in the XHS webinar series on Conversation on Urban Management. We have already done 2 successful webinars in the last 2 weeks. So today we are going to talk on the topic, Rethinking Post-COVID-19 City Resilience. The current crisis is actually an opportunity to reflect on how cities are being planned and managed and brings the concepts such as resilience to the top priorities. So cities as a system are not only in the forefront in absorbing the maximum shock of COVID, but also in responding to it and witness the lasting changes from it. There may be a paradigm shift in the way we think of a city and its relation with its elements in order to build resilience. So in that context, to answer the various questions of what are the lessons we draw from COVID and how we can manage the COVID crisis in Indian cities. So today we have with us an eminent speaker, Professor Chetan Vaidya. He is an architect planner. He is expert architect planner with over 30 years of experience. He was a former director of School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, and also was former director of National Institute of Urban Affairs, New Delhi. He is senior national advisor of Kochi Smart City project. He has also received the Distinguished Alumnus Award in 2015 from IIT Kharagpur. Sir, I welcome you to this webinar.
Thank you.
We also have Dr. Tathagat Chatterjee, professor in the School of Human Settlements at Xavier University, Bhubaneswar. He has more than 20 years of experience in urban domain in various multinational companies and now in academia. I welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Julie.
So now I request Professor Vaidya to deliver the talk. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. First, let me get my slides in this technology.
Sure. Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Jubli. Thank you, Xavier School of Human Settlements. I would also like to thank Dr. Tathagat, Professor Tathagat Chatterjee, a very close friend. And I see a number of friends on the screen. One is from my class in PH, Vishwas Lele from Pune, Kedar, Balwinder, Mayank, and so many of you. So very happy to have you all here and all the friends and students. I am extremely happy and it's an honor to speak to you on this occasion. My content is going to be background of urban India, very briefly. Then resilience city strategy. I want you to understand what is resilience city strategy. Negative impact of COVID-19 as well as positive impact of lockdown. Urban response to this virus. And since I'm in Kerala, I must speak about lessons from Kerala, which is a very good approach, assessing the response, and finally, reimagining urban India. We are 377 million people in urban areas in India in 2011. That is about 31% of total population. There are 4,000 urban local bodies in the country, and 46 of them are more than 10 lakh, which account for almost so India is very diversified and large. Urban India is very large and diversified. No one-size-fits-all solution will work in India. We need to improve our infrastructure as well as governance. I am focusing on two issues. If we want to achieve our economic objectives, we need to improve urban infrastructure as well as urban governance. Both are important. So we are looking for sustainable and inclusive urban development. Government, given the size of the problem or the issues, government has initiated 5 missions: Amrut, Smart City Mission, Heritage City Development and Augmentation Yojana Mission, that is for heritage cities, Housing for All Urban, Bharat Swachh Mission, and most importantly in today's context, National Urban Livelihood Mission specifically focusing on the poor. Now, we must understand that India, the urban governance is at three levels. There's obviously central government, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Then there are, at the state level, there are urban departments, local self-governments, and then finally, we have urban local bodies, which are closest to the people. 74th Constitutional Amendment in 1992 empowered local bodies. They made elections compulsory, so the suspension of local bodies not permitted. But however, the transfer of finances, functionaries is not uniform all over in the country. Different states have different levels of decentralization. If you look at one is the urban local bodies, but then different cities and different states have different types of service delivery system. I'm just explaining you with Ahmedabad, Pune, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai, Agra, and Bhubaneswar. In Ahmedabad, Pune, all services are provided by urban local body. In Hyderabad, solid bed, roads, and street lighting is by Hyderabad Municipal Corporation. Water supply and sewerage board, there is a sewerage board for the city. Town planning is by Development Authority. And of course, all cities now have smart city projects, which has a separate SPV, special purpose vehicle. Then in Agra, again, town planning by Development Authority, basic services by Municipal Corporation, water supply by a state board. In Bhubaneswar is also similar such. So different states and different cities have different authorities and local bodies providing various services. And this has to be kept in mind when we say services, dealing with urban services. Now, I thought I should also talk of urban disaster management. COVID-19 is basically a disaster, and we need to keep that in mind. So we should need to keep in mind how a disaster management cycle works. It consists of three activities: pre-disaster, during disaster, and post-disaster phase. Pre-disaster phase would include prevention, mitigation, and preparedness. You prepare for the disaster. Second would be after the disaster, we talk of emergency response, which talks about damage assessment, search and rescue. If people are under some kind of this, then of the buildings, then you need to look for them. Medical first response and relief management. This comes in the post-disaster, during disaster situation. And finally, we have reconstruction and rehabilitation. So you say, earthquake, how do you give house? Regular, proper houses to people with the reconstruction or rehabilitation. Urban disasters are mostly in terms of earthquakes, flooding, fires, and now we are dealing with a major virus. We had 4 major disasters in last 2 decades. Latur earthquake in 1993, Orissa cyclone in 1999, Bhuj earthquake in 2001, and Indian tsunami in 2004. After these 4 mega disasters, we shifted our focus in disaster management to disaster risk reduction. We are not now talking of reactive approach, but we are talking of proactive risk reduction approach. It covers both pre and post disaster phases. Focus is on entire disaster management cycle with emphasis on mitigation and preparedness. As you all may be knowing, that since Orissa had prepared itself, the last cyclone, they managed this very well. The deaths were very few. Now let's look at urban resilience strategy. Now, as far as urban resilience is concerned, it is defined as the capacity of individual, communities, institutions, business and system within a city to survive and adapt and grow, no matter what kind of stresses and acute shocks they experience. This is 100 Resilience City website I have taken from there. This is the definition. Now, Rockefeller Foundation has started working on urban resilience strategy, supporting urban resilience strategy in India. In phase 1, they supported Indore, Surat, and Gorakhpur. I'm fully aware of the activities of the Surat, which were very innovative. And as one part of that, they develop what they call as some kind of pre-finding when the floods will come up, pre-warning system, which was introduced in Surat, and it saved lot of money and damage when the floods were expected. They would give you a warning about a few more hours, and the city could be saved from major disaster. In phase 2, this program is called 100 Resilient Cities program, and which is supporting 100 cities all over the world under Rockefeller Foundation support. And it is supporting in phase 2, it supported Surat, Pune, Chennai, and Jaipur. Moreover, they also set up a chair in National Institute of Urban Affairs, where the objective is of NIUA under this chair is prepare tools, assess evidence, and establish data observatories, databases for urban resilience strategy. Now, a city resilience framework will include health and well-being, economy and society, infrastructure and environment, leadership and strategy. So it actually covers all the aspects of city planning. And it also does in a characteristics, it has some characteristics of CRF which are reflective. You learn from past experience and you take informed decision. It is not ad hoc decision. You recognize alternative sources of resources. It has to be inclusive. Poor have to be take care of it, and there should be ownership through consultation. You discuss with people at all levels. Integrate with existing systems and institutions. Redundant capacity, you have additional capacity to accommodate disruption. Robust, a well-conceived, constructed and managed system. And finally, it has to be flexible, willing, and ability to adapt alternatives. As far as Surat's resilience strategy is concerned, it had 7 pillars. It was finalized in 2017 under this program, which focused on connectivity and mobility of services and regulation, that is transport, focused on public transport, affordable housing, water availability and quality, they're talking both quantity and quality, dominant sectors of employment and economic development, ecosystem and environmental regulation, social cohesion, extremely important if you really want to do inclusive planning, and upscaling public health. As far as public health is concerned, which is the focus of today's subject, they have a program which focuses on establishing a Center for Urban Health and Climate Change. It focuses on developing urban health important systems so decisions could be taken on information and not ad hoc and intuition. And more, third one is establishing training and capacity building for skills development. So I thought I'll give you some idea of urban disaster and resilience before we get into COVID-19. COVID-19 has been very disruptive for the urban sector. It's a major public health issue. It is also a major economic issue. Most suffered people are informal sector and migrant who have lost jobs. There is reduction in jobs, and it is expected that small-scale manufacturing service sector will lose more jobs, less income. Government also has limited resources for infrastructure investment. There is going to be lack of demand for housing, physical space, and social facilities in immediate future. People who work with urban sector planning and housing and urban development, we need to remember that there will be immediate reduction in demand for these services. But there are also positive impact of the lockdown. Less demand on infrastructure, particularly on public transport. Air is less polluted. Rivers are becoming clean. Online teaching and innovations have been introduced in higher education. Work from home has been introduced as a new work culture. But we need to remember that after the lockdown is over, this may not be sustainable. But we need to see that some of them survive after the lockdown. What has been the response to COVID-19? Surat has developed a COVID-19 tracking system to identify potential victims. The integrated command area control system set up under the smart city mission have turned into war missions, more rooms, And war rooms in diversified cities like Gandhinagar, Raipur, Mysore, Itanagar, Kanpur, and Ujjain are monitoring the disease and communicating with citizens. When these were set up, they were called as white elephants, but they are really doing a very great job at this moment. Pune is working on a web and mobile-based dashboard consisting of live GPS, geofencing, analytics of all stakeholders of the administration. It also keeps track of patient contact tracing and community surveillance and plan resources, including the facilities available and associated manpower needs. Mumbai has adopted a cluster containment strategy to manage this virus in high-risk areas. Wherever they find positive cases, they demark the zone in infected with where they are and clusters with infected zone. It is cordoned off with introduction of movement restriction. Map area is prepared with using GIS. Teams visit this house to house in areas to identify a person with virus symptoms. These patients are sent to hospital for testing, and then it also tries to identify people who were there around the positive tested person. So with the crisis, the cities have grown smarter and using technology to respond to the situation. These initiatives are very laudable of the city administrations. Now, as you all know, Kerala has been a successful model in responding to COVID-19. And the major reason, if you ask me, it is because it is people-centric health system. Traditionally, Kerala has focused on improving their education, provision of education, and provision of public health. As far as local bodies are concerned, Kerala introduced what is called as People's Plan campaign for decentralized governance model since 1996. It transferred 1/3 of the overall budget of the state to the local bodies. Local bodies have to plan these People's Plan activities. It has also transferred sub-centers and primary centers to local governments. In Kerala, city mayors have executive powers. Cities are not managed by municipal commissioner appointed by the state government. There are ward level committees, neighborhood groups, resident welfare association who actively participate in the urban government. And more importantly, there are 40 lakh women who are part of the women's self groups under the statewide Kudamshri mission, which play an active role in delivery of various services. And unlike most of the state governments in the states in India, in Kerala, the Kudamshri mission or the self-help group, women's self-help group, will closely interact with the local bodies. So there is a direct relationship between the local bodies and self-help groups, unlike most of the other states. They don't work separately. And ULBs are enforcing what is called as break the chain campaign in the state. Now, how do you assess this response? These initiatives, which are very laudable in the city level, are mostly ad hoc in nature, mostly humanitarian in nature. Generally, citizens do not trust local government functioning. Communication with citizens become very important with difficult times. We need to explore a new paradigm of trust-based collaboration between local governments and citizens. A new paradigm which shall be citizen-centric and solution-based rather than government-centric and problem-focused. This is what we should be looking for. Now, when we are to reimagine urban India, COVID-19 will require a change in managing India's urban centers. As some of you will recall, after England had the cholera epidemic in 1854, particularly in London, they completely changed how cities are managed. And the part of the modern town planning came after this epidemic. Similarly, in India, city of Surat in Gujarat reinvented itself after the so-called plague in 1994. Surat is completely a different city now. We have to take a similar approach in future. Public health has to be central to urban management. Modern town planning started because of public health issues. Unfortunately, we have forgotten public health and we have started focusing on town planning. We talk of size and the density. We talks about FSI. We talk about length and breadth of the buildings, the height of the building, but we don't talk about public health. This is an issue which has not now to be brought down central to urban planning and urban management. Now, for example, I'm giving an example. Benefits of water supply and sewerage and sanitation have to be considered in terms of improved health impact rather than just providing additional services or getting revenue from the services. We require to reoriented research and capacity building in urban sectors in India. It has to be a different kind of research. It has to be a different kind of capacity building where public health will become central to all these initiatives. Now, as far as increasing city resilience is important to focus on development plans and its implementation on public health, inclusive planning and economic development. How could you find so many migrants on the highways without food, without water, if you had talked about inclusive planning? We should have thought of them right in the beginning. Similarly, infrastructure and environment should be of different kind. And most importantly, we have to develop local leadership and local campaign. I see that some cities in Gujarat, the local leadership is missing. But in Kerala, in Kochi, where there's only at present only one case of COVID-19 in the hospital, the Kochi mayor is walking on the streets, going to different parts of the city every day with the mask around. At her own health, she's going out. That is the kind of, and whenever there is a disaster, Kerala had a big disaster in terms of floods last year and a year before last, 2018 and 2019. The first response was from the local government, not from the state government revenue department. That is the kind of difference, and this happens because local leadership and local champions have to be in the front. And this is my second last slide. We need very strong information system. And we want citizens to have authentic access to authentic information. This calls for authentic, reliable, and robust database and urban information system. Especially, we must work on having information on urban poverty, slums, housing, and other related indicators. The system has to provide details of socio-economic conditions of the urban area at a regular levels. And also, most importantly, we have to learn to take data-driven decisions. Unfortunate architects and planners try to take decisions based on intuition. It's time we should not work on intuition. We should work on data systems based on data. This whole big data analysis for urban sector has come in the front, and we need to make use of data for our decisions. I would like to once again thank Xavier School of Human Settlements in Bhubaneswar to giving me this opportunity. I tell you, please stay at home, stay safe, and break the chain. Thank you so much. Back to you, Dr. Majumdar.
Thank you very much, sir, for your insightful presentation. So I now request Professor Chatterjee to give his views on the topic and proceed with the question, answer, and conversation with Vaidya. Professor Vaidya. So.
Thank you, Jubilee. Now, when a stalwart like Professor Chetan Vaidya speaks, there is very little one can say. Professor Chetan Vaidya has provided almost a 360-degree view about urban resilience. So he has really left very little for me to add on. And I just, summarize some of the key points that he raised. Professor Vaidya has very interestingly pointed out about 3 different types of approaches, which I can see that is coming out of Professor Vaidya's presentation. One is a smart city and the command and control center, which has become the war rooms, as Professor Vaidya has mentioned, which is maybe kind of a forerunner of a more evidence-based urban policy in India. He also talked about a place-based cluster strategy, as in the case of Mumbai. And thirdly, a very people-centric, bottom-up approach, which has been followed in the Kerala by empowering the urban local bodies. So from here, I move on, and I have a question for Professor Vaidya. Is that, I mean, all our cities, as sir, you have already mentioned, have very large segments of informality. Almost 80% of our urban population are dependent on the informal sector for the livelihoods, informal or contractual jobs. Also, big cities like Mumbai and Calcutta and Delhi, which has got very large, almost 40% people living in the slums. And these big cities are also the major drivers of the economy. So, how do you think we should address the question of urban informality in building better resilience city strategies? Which model do you think would work, or rather a combination of all three? What are your views, sir?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we can
Thank
hear
you
you.
so much, Dr. Tadagata Chatterjee. This is a very pertinent question. I think the first step, as I told you in the beginning, the objective of urban planning, urban management in India should be sustainable and inclusive development, urban development. I think these are the two very important. You have to be sustainable and you have to be inclusive. So you have raised the issue which deals with the inclusive part of the development. And you mentioned a figure like something like 70% or 80% in informal sector. We could always work on the figures. That's not important. But a large portion is in the informal sector, and a large portion is staying in low income housing, which we call as slums. And I think the starting point should be that urban planning tools and techniques should first recognize their presence. I think one of the reasons why we did not realize that there are so many people, we are talking of crores of people as migrants who had to leave their cities because they had no jobs after the lockdown. So we need to recognize them, and we need to provide some basic kind of shelter and a basic kind, some kind of insurance. You could use the different terms, some kind of insurance for food security to all these people. I think that should be the starting point. And there are some master plans now which are recognizing them and also identifying areas for affordable housing. But I think we have to go one step further. We, in addition to affordable housing or affordable shelter, we must recognize that low income rental housing is on one hand an important source of income for landlord, which may be authorized or unauthorized. On the other hand, it provides affordable shelter to the poor. So how could we recognize this kind of rental housing, and we also support and encourage them? I would like to go back to a model which was known as Orangi Pilot Project in Karachi, where they used to say, you let the people settle first and then you provide the infrastructure. I'm not saying this is the example, the right example, or wrong example, but I think this is a time when we should also think of providing first the basic land and then think of providing services with some kind of a guarantee that the houses will not be broken, not be destructed by the municipal corporation, local authorities for a period of 5 to 10 years minimum. Then the third would be, how do you give them some kind of basic food security? That would be an issue, and link up with urban community groups. Kerala talks about women's savings group. You have a lot of them in NULM, but NULM scope has to be increased. I think the amount of money we spend on National Urban Livelihood Mission is a very small percent of what we spend on smart mission. If you really want our cities to be safe and inclusive, our budget and for the NULM has to be increased many, many times. And that is the other issue. This will be the 4 or the 5 things I think we should consider. And this has to be recognized as a major urban problem in India.
Thank you, sir. You have raised a very important question. I mean, about the NULM. Incidentally, I mean, I have also focused on the same issue in an op-ed article which is in the press. So I think, I mean, we have some convergence, a lot of convergence rather, in terms of views. I take this also as an opportunity to ask another question on a different issue. As we talk about capacity building in the urban sector, um, there is also a need of maybe rethinking a little bit on the issues of the courses and the curriculums. And as you are a past president of the past chair of the ICT's planning committee, so how do you think, I mean, this crisis informing maybe some rethought in the way the planning courses are being structured, and maybe, I mean, some issues related to urban management also, I mean, regarding plan implementation, some views on that.
Okay. One point I want to mention with your earlier question. I think Odisha has done a very big job of providing security of tenure to the urban poor, at least in the local bodies other than the municipal corporation, and this is being recognized internationally now. Habitat has given UN Habitat has given an award to this thing,
Yes.
and this is something we really need to look at. How do we provide tenure of the people with some kind of where they use drone technology to survey the areas, and then they are given this, and this is something which Tatas are supporting in terms of technical assistance. This is a thing which we need to look at, and then providing water and sanitation to this thing. So that is one example or illustration for taking care of the poor. Now, as far as you are concerned about, you said the training courses, urban planning or urban management courses, I think we need to reorient our courses. I was chairman of All India Council for Planning Education for 6 years, and we have been able to revise our curriculum. It is now going through the final approval of this, and we are talking uh, a lot of changes, at least in 20-25% of the courses. And what is most important, I think two things which is most important coming out for in a planning courses or even management courses: how do we improve participation, and how do we take an integrate approach to planning and implementation? I think at present there is very little or no participation from citizens or the different stakeholders in the planning process and implementation. It is treated as, oh, Kochi's smart city is doing this, but the citizen in Kochi doesn't think he's part of that process. Even municipal corporation thinks that CSML is a different animal. They don't think as a part. Though mayor is on the board of CSML, and it's one of the few places where mayor is on the board of smart city SPVs, there also the corporation doesn't think that it is they think it is some other organ. So that whole participation process, how do we improve it at the ward level, at the area level, and how do we take it at the city? This is one whole area which needs to be taught, and models have to be worked out. This is one. Secondly would be different department things as if they are not talking to each other. The water supply department doesn't talk to the town planning department. The town planning department doesn't talk to the revenue department, and so on. So they all work in isolation. How do we work out an integrated urban strategy at the city level would be a second part of my changes in curriculum. We have suggested some courses to deal with two issues. Let us see how do we progress. I think eventually our faculty has to start looking differently. And I find some of the people like Mayank and Somnath and Luthra and some other people who are here, and Balwinder, who are listening to us, and I'm sure they brought in the change which I wanted to bring in my tenure as the chairman of that board. Yes, Thagar.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So now we have in-house questions. The audience are asking so many questions. We might not able to answer all the question at the moment, but I request everyone to drop their question with the email ID so that we can revert back. So there are few questions. One is on, sir, how do you eliminate politics out of all the planners' effort?
I am saying the other way around.
Okay.
Jubilee, the answer is just the reverse. Instead of saying take out politics from planning, say how can there be more politics in planning? When I say politics, I mean a decision-making process. It's not politics. It's not Congress, and it is not. It's not that way. How do you take decisions in the democratic system? But this is not all elected leadership. How do we do it? And how do we make it more transparent, more accountable, more transparent, rather than saying keep them out of the system? That would be my sweet and short answers to your question.
Okay.
Next question, Jubilee.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. There is another question from Mitali Kedia. It's on how do you think the mobility within the cities should be restructured considering how public transport is overburdened, and how can active modes be encouraged?
Subrata is here. When I studied at IIT Kharagpur more than 40 years ago, my teacher who taught me transport did not talk to the teacher who taught me land use planning. So although they say you have to ignore this thing. So what I'm trying to say is we never thought that land use and public transport has to be integrated together. But now this is a different situation. I think public transport should decide urban land use. That should be the starting point of any discussion on urban transport. Once you have urban nodes, we now call as TOD, transport oriented development, that would decide what would be the densities. Densities should be high near the TDs. As you go away from this, not density has to do. So in the main public transport system, there should be either metro or buses, BRTS as they're called, or good rail system. Then the second would be the bus system. Third would be individual system. So in any public transport, this has to become important, integrating land use with transport, having appropriate density and floor space index, mixed land use, and last minute connectivity. These are some of the solutions I have for public transport.
Okay.
Yes, you will ask the next question. I hope
Yeah,
Mitali
there is
happy with the answer.
I am
Yes.
sure. So, yeah, there is one question regarding ecological systems from Rohit Jigyasu. Is that how do we manage cities in the context of their larger territories, as many urban risks result from loss of ecological systems?
Rohit, this is a very important question.
Yeah.
I think unfortunately we have, as urban planners, architects, physical development people, we thought we are above nature. And I think that is the greatest mistake we have made. If we look at all cities in India and elsewhere, I think the thing they understood best was the geography or the geology of the sites. They understood where they can build and where the water flows will go. And water, obviously, the river and the streams were very important part of because transport was dependent on them. And how do we take care of the issues with weather conditions? Unfortunately, we did not take care of this. So any future city planning has to have environment. Again, my first point, sustainable development has to have an important to environment and ecology and that should decide where the cities will grow, and then link a public transport or land use to this rather than the other ways. We cannot build everywhere, and that is where we also have to bring in how we can take care of temporary places where flooding could take open spaces. How do we link all this with our day-to-day life? That would be my answer to Rohit.
Okay, thank you. One question is from Professor Shraddha Kumar. She's asking about the immediate action, to put some light on the immediate action that urban professional can take at this time of crisis during any kind of emergency or like COVID.
My immediate thing urban professionals should be is to volunteer in the relief issues. I am seeing so many TV programs, so many discussion. I don't find architects and urban planners participating in discussion. I don't find them in active in relief operations. I think that is the first thing we have to do. We have to think of design solutions. It's not that we have to go and pull the cart for supply. I mean, obviously that has to be done. That is what the Prime Minister wants us to do. He's sort of asked us to be more volunteer, be more supportive, be more open-hearted. All that has to be done. But I think, how do we give design solution to the problem? How do we build some? All of us cannot build robots, but how can we build our housing, even temporary shelter, which are which has more green approach? And that is something. So sustainable architecture, sustainable urban planning, and there are going to be emergency shelter. There's going to be more reuse of present existing building. How these buildings could be flexibly used. So focus on design, focus on redesign, on both on products and buildings and complexes would be my immediate approach for architects and planners, and of course city managers.
Okay. So there is one question related to master plan by Anil Roy, is asking like what lessons should we learn as far as preparing master plan of the city is concerned, especially post COVID-19?
I think first thing is we have to revisit our norm for urban planning. That book, which we call as guidebook, which comes out from TCPO, Ministry of Urban Development, has to be revisited. Our norms have to be changed on both the sides. On one hand, we will need areas per unit or per person more than what has been envisaged now. On the other hand, the demand for the services and space is going to be less in immediate future. So I think that would be an approach to this. Make it more green, more environmentally friendly of the master plan. Bring in city resilience strategy. City resilience should be, so cities should be smart and resilient. I think that is what I would like to say. And for that, whatever changes are required in urban planning processes has to be brought in.
Okay. So there is one question related to by Alok. He's asking like urban management, which is major issues of population density and participation of working professional to research. Why there is lukewarm approach towards working professional who are into environment and social impact?
You have to look at the whole thing. Unfortunately, in last 2 decades, urban development is real estate development. We have become very conscious of the commercial value of the space and the complexes. It is no more for the welfare of the people. I'm not saying that people should make losses so this whole area of how did we bring in private sector into urban development, which definitely has positive aspect because it brought in development, but was that the right kind of development? And second would be, how do we sort of make our PPP examples less real estate oriented and more well-being of the population? These are the things we'll have to think as a society as a whole. It's not that only urban planners or only architects or only urban management can take this approach. Society as a whole in India will have to ask this question: what do we want tomorrow to be? How do we want our children to be? And the whole this thing of sustainable development becomes extremely important in this context.
Okay. Uh, uh, we have so many questions actually. So there is one question from JK Gupta. He's asking, could we study the role of planning in making cities disaster free? I think
Yes,
making
yes.
disaster. Yeah.
Sure, there is this disaster. There is what one is called as National Institute of Disaster Management in Delhi,
Yeah.
under the
Yeah.
Disaster Management Authority, directly under the Home Ministry. I'm sorry. They are working on training programs, and there is a whole separate training programs for urban disasters. There's also very focused attention they are giving on floods, urban floods. They have come out with guidelines. They are discussing this with our ministry. So our ministry and Home Ministry has to work together on this aspect. The whole issue of fire, I mean, you will be very surprised to know so many hospitals get fire because they have this equipment which is with the electrical failures and other things, which leads to fire in different hospitals. We have seen, I mean, you must have seen in most cities, many cities, the example, including AIMS, had a fire recently. But even today, we don't know what should be the size of a door in a hospital. That basic thing also, there are a lot of discussion happening. So how do we take care of fire? How do we take care of urban floods? Can there be temporary gardens? Can there be open spaces which can take care of flooding, which is called a sponge kind of planning? So these are the kind of thing we need to develop. NIDM has given us this big, good platform. We need to use it, and urban planners have to look at various disasters. Don't only talk of COVID, talk of all kinds of disaster. It could be earthquake, it could be flooding, it could be fire, it could be health issues. All we should look at as from the urban urban planning point of
Okay. Uh,
view.
thank you.
JK Gupta wants more to ask something more. You can find out. Anyway.
Yeah, I request everyone to please drop your questions with email so that we can revert back after this webinar. And now I request Professor Chatterjee to, if you have any question, or you may proceed with the discussion, sir.
No, I think we have covered almost the entire range of issues. And I would like to come in, and also I think we have almost come to the end. So I'd like to ask one last question to Professor Chetan Vaidya before we end this discussion. Sir, you talked about the importance of urban management as a kind of a discipline, as an integrator of different domains. In which, you know, I mean, as you are very rightly specified, that said that we are working in silos, even within same cities or within even the same institutions. That, I mean, there are silo mentality is still very strong. And so, in a way that, I mean, urban management and urban planning kind of complements each other. And so, I would like your views on how this lesson that we are learning from COVID is going to inform the new urban agenda, because, you know, in the new urban agenda of the UN Habitat, there is a lot of emphasis on integration. So, do you think, you know, I mean, this post-COVID, there would be some further retweaking on that front, or there would be more emphasis on that on this issue?
Yes, in future after the COVID-19, I think there is going to be a lot of focus in urban management. This would mean developing proper kind of projects and approaches. We call them urban schemes, which could be or urban strategy, and the action plan. They will have a lot of importance to urban management, where there are no different kinds of things, people not talking to each other, and integrated. And urban management is one discipline which can bring them together. Secondly, they can also help us to implement policies and programs. I think that is one area where we are weak. We were very weak project development. Somehow we have learned to develop appropriate what is called as DPRs, detailed project report. Now urban planners and urban managers are able to learn preparation of DPRs. DPR, when I say, previously it used to be just engineering estimates. Building का plan बना दिया और engineering details दे दिए, but that is not DPR. DPR also means institutional structure, who will do, who will construct, who will manage, who will collect the revenues, who will pay. That is one aspect. Other is the resource mobilization part of it. The whole issue, how do you generate revenues, how do you collect those revenues, and how you pay back the people whom you've taken money. So the standard PWD style, which was only an expenditure department, has to go away. Now, it's already going away. People have started talking in terms of resource mobilization, financing. And there is something very interesting being discussed at the ministry level, is what we call as development impact bonds, DIBs. In the future, it will not be what we did as municipal bond. For starting with Ahmedabad, we talked about municipal bond, and now about 20 cities have issued bonds for financing urban infrastructure. They are taxable, they are non-taxable, they are also pool fund. But I think the next stage, which will be part of COVID, when money is going to be very limited, they will be not only financing for the market, but market will expect that the funds they are paying will also be used for achieving some measurable goals. So they will say so much of water to so many people. If I am giving you a loan, a bond, I'm buying a bond for water supply, I should be able to use to supply water of a certain pressure and certain quantity, and which is called as DIBs. It is going to be in picture, and that is one area where we must think. And then how do you monitor urban development? How do you monitor and how do you measure? I think measurement is going to be big issue. Again, there the urban management field has should have a lot of knowledge and experience,
Yes.
a lot of knowledge on data, which should be built into our systems, where both this financing with impact, positive impact, measurable impact, and how do we sort of have a database where we take decisions based on big data analysis.
Thank you so much, sir. I mean, it was really a great pleasure having you here. And before I end the discussion, I'd like to share one information with the audience that is assembled here. Is that Professor Chetan Vaidya, along with his many feathers on his hat, he is also a member of the Strategic Academic Advisory Board of Xavier University. So it was really wonderful having you here, sir. I'd like to thank you and thank all the other participants who has asked here. We have really run out of time. We could have taken more questions, but we have just run out of time. So we'd like to be excused. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
So much. Thank you.